It is a headline the United States has been dreading for months. 3 United States service members killed, dozens more injured. A drone strike launched in the dead of night, slipping past American air defenses. These 3 soldiers, Sergeant William Jerome Rivers, Specialist Kennedy Ladon Sanders, and Specialist Breonna Alexsondria Moffett, were Army reservists from Georgia. They deployed to serve their country. They will return home under flag-draped transfer cases. Since the outbreak of the Israel-Hamas war in October, U.S. forces in the Middle East had been attacked over 160 times by Iran-backed militia groups, rockets, missiles, and drones. But until this moment, those attacks had resulted in injuries and property damage, but no American deaths. Now, the red line has been crossed. In this video, we are going to break down exactly what happened at a little-known outpost called Tower 22. We will look at who was responsible, how a slow-moving drone managed to bypass a billion-dollar military defense network, and the incredibly complex, dangerous choices now facing Washington. Because the question isn't just how the U.S. will respond. The question is, will that response ignite a wider regional war? Let's get into it. To understand this crisis, we first have to understand where it happened. Before this strike, most Americans had never heard of Tower 22. It's a secretive, logistics support base located in northeastern Jordan. It sits right on the border with Syria. Roughly 350 U.S. Army and Air Force personnel are stationed here. Their primary mission? To support the U.S.-led coalition fighting the remnants of ISIS, and to provide logistics for another nearby U.S. garrison inside Syria called Al-Tanf. Here is what we know about the attack. In the early hours of the morning, a one-way attack drone, also known as a kamikaze or suicide drone, flew low towards the base. Because of the time of day, many of the troops were asleep in their living quarters, which are essentially prefabricated trailers. They offer little to no protection against high explosives. But this raises a massive question for the American public. The U.S. military possesses the most advanced air defense systems on Earth. How did a relatively cheap, slow-moving drone hit a U.S. base? According to preliminary reports from the Pentagon, it was a deadly case of mistaken identity. At the exact time the enemy drone was approaching Tower 22, an American drone was returning to the base from a mission.
The air defense operators saw a drone on their screens. But because the U.S. drone was expected, there was confusion over whether the incoming signal was friendly or hostile. By the time they realized it was an enemy weapon, it was too late to sound the alarm or fire interceptors. The drone slammed directly into the living quarters. 3 soldiers died. More than 40 others were injured, some with severe traumatic brain injuries, requiring medical evacuation to higher-level care facilities in Iraq and Germany. Almost immediately, the question shifted to who pulled the trigger. The U.S. government quickly pointed the finger at the Islamic resistance in Iraq, but that is not a single traditional army. The Islamic resistance in Iraq is an umbrella term for a coalition of hardline Shia militant groups. The most prominent among them is Kataib Hezbollah. But while these groups may have launched the drone, the weapons, the funding, the intelligence, and the training all lead back to one place: Tehran. For decades, Iran's Quds Force, the unconventional warfare branch of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, has built a network of proxy armies across the Middle East. They call it the Axis of Resistance. Iran's strategy is brilliant in a dark, tactical sense. By funding proxies to do their fighting, Iran maintains plausible deniability. They can strike U.S. bases, disrupt global shipping in the Red Sea, and attack Israel, all while officially claiming that these groups act independently. Iran's official statement following the Tower 22 strike was predictable. Their foreign ministry claimed Iran had no connection and nothing to do with the attack. But the Pentagon and U.S. intelligence agencies reject this. While the U.S. acknowledged they didn't have evidence that Iranian leaders explicitly ordered this specific strike on this specific day, they made it clear Iran provided the gun, even if a proxy pulled the trigger.
So why are these attacks happening now? It all ties back to the broader geopolitical explosion triggered on October 7th. Since the war in Gaza began, Iran-backed groups have stated their goal is twofold. First, to force the U.S. to withdraw its support for Israel, and second, to ultimately drive the U.S. military out of the Middle East entirely by making the cost of staying too high in American blood. The deaths of 3 American soldiers fundamentally shifted the political reality in Washington, D.C. Historically, when an American is killed overseas by a hostile actor, the U.S. military responds with overwhelming force. But the situation currently facing the U.S. government is a geopolitical minefield. Domestically, a massive debate immediately erupted over how to respond. The debate fell largely into two schools of thought. The first perspective argues for direct, punishing strikes. Many lawmakers, particularly prominent Republicans, argue that hitting Iranian proxies is just playing whack-a-mole. They argue that Iran will not stop funding these attacks until Iran itself feels the pain. Some politicians called for direct strikes on targets inside the sovereign territory of Iran, such as IRGC naval assets, oil infrastructure, or training bases. The logic here is that weakness invites aggression. By not hitting Iran directly, the U.S. is essentially giving them a free pass to kill Americans through their proxies. But then there is the second perspective, heavily favored by the current administration and many military planners. They argue that striking inside Iran would cross a massive red line of its own. If the U.S. bombs Iranian soil, Iran would be forced to respond. They could close the Strait of Hormuz, cutting off 20% of the world's oil supply, sending the global economy into a tailspin. They could unleash Hezbollah on Israel with tens of thousands of missiles. In short, a direct strike on Iran could trigger World War III in the Middle East. The Biden administration had to thread an almost impossible needle. They needed a response that was strong enough to hurt the militias and deter future attacks, but calibrated enough to avoid pulling the U.S. into a full-scale ground war with Iran. Military analysts started calling it the Goldilocks strike. Not too hot, not too cold.
A few days after the Tower 22 attack, the United States made its move. On a Friday night, U.S. forces launched a massive, multi-tiered retaliation. They didn't hit just one target, they hit 85. Using long-range B-1 bombers flown directly from the United States, alongside fighter jets stationed in the region, the U.S. military dropped more than 125 precision munitions on 7 different facilities across Iraq and Syria. The targets were carefully selected: command and control operations, intelligence centers, rocket and missile storage facilities, and drone supply chain logistics. Crucially, these facilities belonged not just to the proxy militias, but directly to Iran's IRGC Quds Force. The message was clear: we are taking away the weapons you use to hit us, and we are hitting the Iranian operatives who train you. But notably, the U.S. did not strike inside Iranian territory. The Pentagon also signaled that this was just Tier 1 of their response. Officials stated that the retaliation would not be a single event, but a sustained campaign over weeks. In the aftermath, something interesting happened. Kataib Hezbollah, the main proxy group blamed for the Tower 22 attack, publicly announced they were suspending military operations against U.S. forces to prevent embarrassment to the Iraqi government.
Was this a genuine retreat or a tactical pause orchestrated by Iran, who realized they had pushed the Americans too far and wanted to avoid a direct confrontation? Intelligence experts are heavily leaning toward the latter. Iran wants to bleed the U.S., but it does not want a conventional war it knows it cannot win. The loss of Sergeant Rivers, Specialist Sanders, and Specialist Moffett is a tragic reminder of the human cost of global geopolitics. They were thousands of miles from home, stationed at a remote outpost, serving as part of a complex chess game between global powers. The U.S. strikes in Iraq and Syria may have temporarily deterred the militias, but the underlying issue remains unsolved. As long as the war in Gaza continues, the Middle East will remain a powder keg. The U.S. military remains deployed across a region where thousands of hostile actors view them as the ultimate enemy. The drones are still out there, the proxies are still funded, and the threat to American lives is far from over. What do you think the United States should do? Did the retaliatory strikes go far enough, or should Washington have taken a harder line against Iran directly? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. This is a highly debated topic, and I want to read your perspectives. If you found this breakdown helpful in understanding what is actually happening overseas, please hit the like button and subscribe for more deep dives into global security. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.